Hey everybody, I'm Christian, and in today's video we are gonna talk about self-hosting GitLab, and I'm gonna give you some insights into my setup and how I'm using this to manage my complete HomeLab deployments, including applications and containers, automated deployments, storing configuration settings and managing updates, because in HomeLab we usually got dozens of applications up and running and we are testing and experimenting a lot. To keep this chaos and mess under control, you need some form of central source of truth. And for me, this is GitLab. It's the heart and core of storing all the necessary information for my HomeLab deployments. And I know what some of you guys are thinking, well, Christian, GitLab is nice, but it's also kind of heavy and uses a lot of resources. And there are better and simpler solutions out there like Git and ForDue. I know all of this, but honestly, guys, I'm pretty happy with GitLab because I love all of the features. I love the CLI tool. I love the UI and the user experience. And I just recently added some resource optimizations that brought down my GitLab memory utilization from 7 GB down to about 3 GB, which actually makes GitLab usable for smaller setups. So today I'm going to show you exactly how to install and set up this thing. We go over the resource optimizations. By the way, thanks to Nukas from our Discord community who showed me some of the tricks, and I'm going to explain how exactly I'm using and managing GitLab to automate my HomeLab deployments and configurations. So I hope this is going to be valuable for you guys. Before we start, I quickly want to show you another incredible tool that I honestly use every single day and also throughout all of my videos. It's called Warp, the sponsor of today's video, and this is a full agentic development environment that unites the best CLI and IDE features into one single application. You can simply use Warp as your main CLI program, use the built-in AI agent to autonomously create and execute commands, analyze your CLI output to troubleshoot and fix issues. You can even let it write code that is tailored to your code base to build, ship and deploy sophisticated applications. It's absolutely fantastic. For example, I've recently released my own CLI tool called Boilerplates, which we'll also later use in the video, by the way. And honestly, without Warp, I wouldn't have been able to do this. Yeah, it was such a huge help to let AI write large parts of the code base or maintain GitHub issues with the built-in MCP server support in Warp. So there are tons and tons of features in Warp that will make your life as a developer or tech nerd easier. And if you haven't tried it out yourself yet, you can now get Warp Pro free for 7 days with 2,500 AI credits. So that's a lot. And there is no card required when you sign up. So definitely check it out. Of course, I'll put your link in the description box down below. Okay guys, so now let's get started with GitLab. First of all, if you're completely new to this and you never used a Git platform before, maybe because you're not a software developer and you're wondering why the heck should you even use this? Well, of course, although Git platforms are pretty popular in software development as a cross-collaboration platform, so you can store code, you can maintain version histories and collaborate with different developer teams on one single project. Well, I still think this is super useful in a HomeLab as a central storage location for all of your projects and deployment files. You can easily get started and get a feeling for this if you sign up on a cloud platform like GitHub or also GitLab. You can just go to their website, gitlab.com, sign up, and then just start creating private or public projects and use this for your HomeLab as well. So there's nothing wrong with that. However, I think if you want to have a little more control over the platform, you want to keep the data and the storage all on your personal servers, GitLab has a pretty interesting offering because they also have a community version or even a free enterprise version that you could use and install. Now, this is the first confusion that I need to address at the very beginning, because if you go to the pricing, you see a free version, a premium, and an ultimate version. So what you're seeing here is actually the enterprise version. So that is mainly used in company environments. If you need additional AI features, you can upgrade from the free license to the premium and ultimate license and so on. So the enterprise version of GitLab has a few more features, but probably mostly interested to companies. Now, in this video, we're going to install the free community edition of GitLab because I think this is much more suitable for a smaller environment because you actually don't need all of the enterprise features in a HomeLab, and you probably will never upgrade to the premium licenses. Now, if you want to install the free community edition of GitLab in your HomeLab, there are different ways of how you could do this. You could install this in Docker, so this is the preferred way that I'm also going to show you in this video. But you could, of course, also install this in Kubernetes, or even install this on a Linux machine with a Linux package. That's also possible. Depending on what your requirements are, you might choose the one or another way. And here in the installation instructions, we can find more details about how to configure the SSH port, how to create a directory for the volumes, how to create the GitLab RB configuration file, and there is even a Docker Compose template that you could use. But because of the complexity of the configuration and different versions and installations, I thought I'm just gonna create my own template, because I recently created my own Boilerplates library repository that currently contains a CLI tool that you could use to quickly and simply set up a new GitLab Docker Compose file that you can easily run on your HomeLab. And this can be pre-configured with smart default values that also configures automatically the configuration file depending on whether you're using traffic, reverse proxy, or if you want to configure an email notification and sign up and stuff like that. So to easily get started, you just need my Boilerplate CLI tool. You just download it with this one-line script command from my GitHub repository. Of course, I'll put you a link to this in the description. So all you do is just copy this, install the dependencies in your terminal, and then you can use the Boilerplate command to browse through my templates. So here, for example, let's just execute the compose list command that will give you a list of all the available templates in here. As you can see, there is GitLab in the latest version 18.4.2. I'm regularly updating these templates, so when you're watching the video a bit later, you should see an updated template version in here. And to show some of the details, what you can configure in this template, you can automatically enable the performance preset, so that will bring down tremendously the amount of memory usage. And you can also choose between just running this with a simple port exposure, or you can automatically integrate this in your traffic reverse proxy setup if you want. Set up an email server for email sign up and notification on your platform, and you can even integrate this in Authentic. Of course, I've made tutorials about traffic and about Authentic, so if that's of any interest for you, then check out my other videos. I will put you a link to this in the description box down below. But if you just want to get started with a super simple and super quick setup on your local device to just get a feeling for how to work with a Git platform, you can generate a new boilerplate for GitLab based on the default values. And let us just go through some of this stuff in here. For example, the service name, I just want to keep using GitLab. The container name you could customize if you want. Also the restart policy, however, I think unless stopped should be fine for most scenarios here. And if you're using this on your real server, you might need to change the external URL for GitLab from localhost to something else. So depending on if you're using a traffic reverse proxy with TLS certificates that you enabled, you might want to use HTTPS and then the IP address or the fully qualified domain name that is forwarded to the IP address of the server that you're using. However, in my example, I'm just going to keep localhost so I can easily start this on my local machine. And of course, I also enable the ports so I can access the internal HTTP, SSH, and registry port. Now, if you're using traffic reverse proxy, even though there is a custom SSH port, you can disable the port exposure because usually we don't want anybody to access our GitLab instance by using an unencrypted connection. Now, the SSH port is by default set to 2424, and the reason for this is that on most deployments or most servers, the default SSH port 22 is most likely in use by the internal OpenSSH server that is running on your server machine. And if you try to run GitLab that will listen on the default SSH port, that usually doesn't work because it's already in use. So therefore, we need to switch the SSH port to something else. By default, I've chosen 2424, but you could, of course, customize this if you need. And if you also want to enable the container registry of GitLab, so by default, the container registry is disabled. But if you want to build Docker or container images and you want to store them on your internal registry of GitLab, this also might be useful for some people. You can also do this, and then you can also change the container registry port. Note, this setting is only important when you're not using traffic. Because when you're using traffic with TLS, there's also a setting to automatically create a new subdomain for the container registry. So you could have one for your internal GitLab platform and one for the registry platform. And then if you don't expose the ports, the container registry is not needed. Anyways, I just want to set the default values here. And now we come to the next setting. So this is quite interesting. This enables the performance optimization profile. Now, this enables certain settings. We will later also take a look at the configuration, what exactly I have configured or preloaded here. But I have added two different profiles. One that I've just called HomeLab. So this is for smaller environments, and this will still run quick and fast for up to 10 users or so. But if you want to go beyond that, so if you want to set up GitLab for a larger platform, you of course want to go with the defaults and not enable the performance optimization profile. This is really just to bring down the memory and CPU usage on smaller HomeLab setups. As well as this here, so here you can enable the Prometheus monitoring if you want to monitor your GitLab platform. However, disabling this monitoring brings down the memory utilization. So then, of course, metrics will become unavailable, but you will also save some memory. Now you can enable traffic, so that is the reverse proxy that you probably know from my other tutorials. If you enable this, so that allows you to quickly and easily protect GitLab with trusted TLS certificates. Again, might be only interesting for people using traffic. On my local test device, I'm not using it, so I will just go with the default, which is to disable traffic. And I also don't want to configure an email server now. However, on your production setup, I definitely would recommend this as well. You sometimes get email notifications, for example, about failed CI/CD pipelines or changes in repository and stuff like that. So you definitely should enable this on your production setups to enable email notifications. And also, if you're using Authentic as a single sign-on, I'm using this on my production GitLab instance, also quite useful. You can enable this and then configure settings like the Authentic base URL, so where your Authentic server is running, the client ID, the client secret, and the Authentic slug that you're using for your application and service provider. So again, if that doesn't mean anything to you, just ignore it. It's probably for advanced setups, but I thought it might be useful to include it in these templates here as well. Okay, so now the Boilerplates tool will generate two files. It will generate the compose.yaml file so that you can start with Docker Compose on your local or remote server. And it will also auto-create a GitLab.rb. So this is the main configuration file for GitLab. And I want to say yes, so generate these files. Now, the next steps here, I've also described what we need to do next to start up this service. So here, for example, we need to go into the GitLab directory and execute a Docker Compose up. So this will create the persistent volumes. It will create a GitLab default network and start up the container. It's taking about like 1 to up to 5 minutes. So in my setup, it's mostly taking 2 to 3 minutes until the GitLab platform is ready. And then we can open the web interface on the configured external URL. So in my case, you can see that's on my local developer device. GitLab is currently starting. And then we need to collect the initial root password, because by default, when you install a new GitLab instance, it will create a new root user and it will also auto-generate a password. So in the next steps, I've added the commands that you need to execute. So let's go to the directory and just run this. This will get you back the root password, and then we just need to log in with our root user and the password and sign in. And here we are. So technically your GitLab instance is now ready, but there are a few important settings I'd recommend you to take a look at. So first of all, you should definitely deactivate auto signups, because especially if your GitLab instance is publicly facing, which might not be the case for all environments, but I think it's a security risk to allow auto signups on your personal, private, and protected environment. So just go to deactivate. This will take you to the menu settings where you can disable sign up. Okay, so don't forget to click on Save Settings. And the next thing is to change the initial root password. Go to Preferences or Profile Settings. So here you can see the password setting. Just enter current password, give it a new password. And of course, you can also make changes, enable two-factor authentication, which might be important. You can also change the username from root to something more useful, yeah, like your personal username you want to use. You can create access tokens, email addresses, and stuff like that. So because we didn't configure an email server, this will be automatically set to example.com. So when you're doing commits, it's sometimes mentioning your email address, so could be a bit annoying. But again, this is just a local and simple test setup, so I'm not going to worry about it. If you want to create a production-ready template, just use the boilerplates and fill in some of the information that will help you to get this up and running. Now, I still want to take a closer look at the files in the folder here, because it's one thing to trust the boilerplates templates, but actually I'm a big fan to take a look behind the curtain and get a better understanding of what's actually happening here. So this is a super simple template that was generated by the boilerplates, and in the configuration file are some auto-configured settings. So here the external URL. Of course, you can change all of this stuff in here before you deploy this to production, so you can generate a template and then later make adjustments if you want. Yeah, you don't always have to use the boilerplates tool to regenerate it. But here you can see that GitLab also would support internal Let's Encrypt with TLS. I've disabled this because I think it's better to traffic handle the TLS certificates. And here are also the performance settings I just talked about. So this is the HomeLab profile for small setups. For example, I'm reducing or limiting the Postgres SQL memory. The maximum concurrency also reduces the number of background jobs that are processed simultaneously, lowering RAM and CPU usage. Worker processes are set to 1. The worker timeout is increased a little because it might take a bit longer until it's processed. So these small adjustments bring down the memory consumption of GitLab, at least for my deployment, to about like 40% usage compared to before. So that's quite huge. And also this is the Prometheus monitoring setting that is disabled, so save you 200 or 400 megabytes of memory. All right, so I know we spent a lot of time on this setup, but I think this is super important because GitLab is such a huge and complex platform. And I just recently found out some of the performance settings that might help a lot of you guys to run this in smaller environments. Of course, if you never used such a platform, it might be completely overwhelming, and I totally understand this. So that's why I've made many, many different videos about GitLab and Git platforms in general and how to work with this. However, if you just want to start super simple and you just want to use GitLab as a simple storage for some of your compose files or configuration deployments, you could just use this and create your project to manage files, either code repositories, deployment files. It actually doesn't really matter. And when you create a project, you can clone this to your local device, and then you can make changes on your local machine and push the changes to GitLab, and it's constantly maintaining a file history. So GitLab always remembers every change you make in a single file, line by line, if you want. So if you just change a single word in a line, it's memorizing there was a change in this one particular file, and you could revert back to older versions. So this is super, super useful. On my production instance, you can see I've created all of the different projects for all of the technologies or applications or things that I'm doing. You can see I've created a project for my traffic deployments, or for my GitLab deployment, I've created a separate project, and it goes on. And I've also created some personal projects, like this is a repository for my website where I'm managing the website deployment, or some testing repositories when I'm experimenting. For example, I'm just going to show you the Portainer project. So here you can see I'm storing files for the Terraform management, so that manages the DNS resources. And I'm also storing deployments. So here is the Portainer agent file, the Portainer project. So here's the Docker Compose file for just running Portainer on my local HomeLab. So this is a very simple file that I'm storing here. However, I'm using GitLab to not only store this, but also do automated updates. I will show you later how exactly that works. But if you're completely new to this, I would recommend you to create a new group, call this HomeLab, or you can create multiple groups for different environments or stuff like that. That also makes sense. And then start creating projects for each HomeLab project that you're doing. It doesn't have to be for every application. It could also be a project for monitoring stack, where you collect deployment templates for Grafana, Prometheus, Lokios, stuff like that. But don't forget to spread them out a little and organize them in a single group. I will just show you another one, for example, Authentic. So here I'm managing the deployment files, which is basically Helm chart values file and some Kubernetes manifests for the ingress routes that's needed for traffic, the certificate definition and stuff like that. And of course, some Terraform projects here. So there I'm managing the Authentic applications, the outposts, the DNS records. And I also created a GitLab CI. So this is an automated CI/CD pipeline. I will later show you how exactly that works. But the reason why I organize everything in one single HomeLab group is all these automated deployments, for example, the Helm values in here, will require some secrets. For example, there's a Postgres server that requires a database password, and Authentic also requires a secret key that is used to encrypt all of the information in the database. And it is never really a good idea to store these type of secrets in plain text files. It's even worse to store them in a Git managed repository, because if you remember what I said earlier, Git remembers all of the changes in a file. So even if you once added a secret or a password in here, and then you delete it with an update, it's still stored in the Git history, and someone could still look it up. So that's really super important. Never store any credentials or secret variables in Git repositories. Super dangerous. Now, what you should do instead is use the GitLab's integrated secret variables. If you go to settings CI/CD, there is a setting variable where you can create secret variables where the value is hidden, or you can just add other variables that store certain settings. There are some secret variables that are only required for Authentic to run. For example, the secret key. This is only consumed by Authentic. However, if you want to add some other variables, for example, managing Terraform, stuff like that, or connecting other APIs, you don't want to always manage these variables for each of your repositories. So that's why you can create group variables. So these are inherited from the group, and then each of the projects in the HomeLab group can use these variables. And then you don't need to store this sensitive information inside deployment templates or stuff like that. So this is also super important. And what I also just recently found out that is super useful is the GLab CLI tool. It's pretty nice. You can check all of the repositories or the projects that you are running. For example, a repo list will list out all of my repositories on my personal GitLab instance. So here I can see all of the CI/CD pipelines that were executed and what was the status and so on. So you can really automate a lot with this GLab tool. I really like this, and sometimes it's even faster. Also because you can use this in Warp Terminal and tell AI to use the GLab tool to get access to some of the CI/CD pipelines. Troubleshoot this with the AI tools. That is also super useful. Just go to the documentation, search for GLab. There you can see some installation instructions how to do this. I think it's even available in Homebrew if you're using macOS. Of course, also Linux, Windows, and subsystem for Linux. All right, so if you use GLab, you first of all need to authenticate. So just type in GLab auth login. Just go to GitLab self-managed, and it will guide you through some of the settings. You just need to add the URL. And if you want to clone repositories using SSH, I would always recommend you to use SSH for Git cloning, because then you can add your SSH key and then create a personal access token for API requests. By the way, let's go through this once, because I think that might be also quite important. So let's go to the testing instance here. So when you go to your account preferences, you can set up SSH keys, so that's quite important. Just click on Add New SSH Key, and I also going to disable the expiry key, and then I can use this to authenticate with SSH to my GitLab instance. The same for access tokens, so that's a bit annoying because you have to specifically set an expiration date here. That's a bit annoying, and I think 1 year is the longest time. Actually, a few days ago, my personal access token in GitLab expired, and all of my CI/CD pipelines stopped working and I couldn't authenticate, and I was wondering what the heck is now going on. But yeah, that's one of the things that you might notice a year later, that you need to refresh your personal access tokens from time to time. It's a bit annoying, but yeah, it is what it is. If you're using this as an administrator, just enable all of the scopes in here. Otherwise, you can specifically define if the access token can only read through the repository or make changes to the repository. If you want to use all the features, just enable everything. And then you can execute GLab auth login. It will also ask for your token, and then you should get access to the tool. But yeah, so back to the topic. That's basically how I'm using GitLab as a central source of truth for all of my projects. And I'm also using this to manage updates to my deployments. For example, I'm running a simple application called Renovate. I also made a video about this, and I've connected this to my personal GitLab instance, and it's automatically scanning all of the packages and the dependencies and notifies me about any updates. For example, let us go to my N8N. And so here you can see I'm deploying N8N in a simple Docker Compose project. And I'm using pinned tagged versions here so that I can automatically get update notifications. So when I go back, I can show you the renovate.json file. So here I've configured that it should watch the Docker Compose package and notify me about any minor, major, or patch updates. And it automatically creates so-called merge requests. And these merge requests you can review one by one, where you can specifically see when you go to the changes in what file it changed which line. So here you can see it changes from version 11.5 to 11.6. And if that's a change I want to automatically run, I can just click on merge, and this will start my CI/CD pipeline that will automatically connect to my SSH server where this Docker Compose project is running. It will execute a Docker pull command to pull down the latest image version, and then it will execute Docker Compose down and Docker Compose up-d, so to restart the container with a new image and run this in the background. And I can also view this process here in GitLab, so I can also go in here and get a trace log of all the commands that are executed. So yeah, that is what you can all do with GitLab. Again, I don't want to overload you with information, but I just wanted to explain what you can all do with this and why this is so great to manage deployments in your HomeLab. I hope this video at least helped you to get started and set up a simple GitLab self-hosted instance with my Boilerplates templates. And then take it from there. I will put you a new playlist that I've created with all of my GitLab tutorials in the description, so you have enough content to watch after setting up this. And of course, yeah, just follow me for more content. That would be really great. And if you could give the new GitHub repository Boilerplates some stars and use this, that's really appreciated from my side. Alright guys, but that's it for now. I let you go and let you play around with this. Have some fun, experiment a lot. Thanks to all my Patreon supporters and YouTube members. You guys make all of this possible. And I'm gonna catch you all in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.